I'm gonna show you how to make an emotional and melodic organic house track. This is the style that artists like Volen Sentir, Jorge Hewick, and PROFF are known for. But I'll be using my own remix that I recently released to show you how I managed to create this track that fits this style. Remember, you can download a condensed version of this project file, samples, presets, as well as other projects on my Patreon, which is also a great way to support the channel. I'll put a link to that in the description below. Let's get started. I'm gonna start at the kick drum and go through every layer of the track in this project, teaching you the processing and my thought process so that you can learn from this and take it with you to write your own tracks in a similar style. The track is 120 beats per minute, which is typical for organic house. Between maybe 118, 122, even 123 beats per minute is pretty standard. The track is also in F minor, and we're going to be using some chords later that are not in F minor, but actually in the major scale, and that's really important to talk about, but we'll get to that later when we get to the synths part of the video. Starting with my kick drum, I have 2 layers of kick. With organic house, you want to typically have your kick drum be very mid-present. You don't want a kick that's super snappy or a lot of high end or clicky. Usually the mid section is very warm. It's not muffled, but it has a lot of like colorful mid frequencies. This is the kick from the original song. And the reason I have the original kick as well as a lot of the other original stems is because this is a remix. So I have a bunch of the original layers from the original track and I've remixed them. So that's why I'll be using a lot of different stems throughout the video as well. So it's not a bad kick, but it does need a little bit of color. So I've added an overdrive onto the top end of the kick with just a little bit of dry wet. Adds just a nice crispiness to it. The drum bus also adding a little bit of drive and only at 28% dry wet, also pushing up the transients to get it to punch through a little bit harder. A little bit more boost on the top end. Then finally a multiband dynamics to compress and push up that low end. Layering it up with the second kick here gives it that nice color that I was talking about. It's not too snappy. Combine them both together. Really cuts through the mix. And with organic house, sometimes the kick doesn't have to be super powerful. It can be a little bit more quiet depending on the energy of the track, but I think this one sits pretty well in the mix, being kind of in between loud and a little bit quieter because it's a little bit more of a chill track for me. And lastly, I just have some compression on the kicks because there's 2 layers. I want to glue them back together. Pretty subtle. And if you want to add a little bit of color to your kick drums, maybe they don't feel like they have enough presence in the mids, you can try out some of these tools in Ableton, like Amp. It's pretty powerful, so you have to be careful not to make it too heavy, but the blues preset here, I've pushed on the treble because I don't want it too clicky, and just adding a little bit of dry wet. The overdrive is another one that I use all the time. You just want to choose a small section of the kick, either in the mids or the highs, and add only about 5 to 10%. You have drum bus, which has a saturator in it already and a limiter, so I only use about 20% to give it a bit of color with the crunch. Pedal, we have the overdrive, distortion, and fuzz. Again, subtle, just a low amount of dry wet. And then finally, we have the cabinet, which you can do a bunch of different presets in here. There's a really cool melodic trick that I did with the bass line, but I'm going to talk about that after I show you all the sound design and the MIDI. Here's the kick and the bass line together. For organic house bass lines, I suggest using octaves as well as combining staccato notes or like shorter stabby notes with more sustained notes. And the combination of these two makes the bass lines more dynamic and more interesting, especially using octaves. You can also use toms instead of octaves. So I suggest getting like a strong groove with just the octaves first or the toms first. So we could listen to this with the kick. And then you can add in that lower octave of bass. You'll notice that the note over here is actually sustained. We're just giving that variation, and the sustained notes also sort of bring down the energy a little bit. So the broken up staccato notes can increase the energy, but the longer notes kind of slow down the energy. So it also matters what kind of vibe you're going for. And with organic, a lot of the time, the slower energy is what you might want. So like I said, these can be swapped out for toms, which works really well, but I just kept it as the bass notes. And I actually added in a couple other bass notes because I'm more of a progressive artist, so I like to have these extra layers. This is actually just a top layer to give a little bit more color to the bass. And here it actually sustains longer, so I get that longer feeling of bass, even though the sub's not there. Just pay attention to this section right here. It just holds on a bit longer. And again, I feel like that kind of just makes it a bit lower energy, a bit slower, and it just glues that section together a bit more. And then I have this other layer of bass down here, which is just adding a bit of variation. And one more down here just to add, to break up the bar so that it's a little bit longer. It's only at the end. It's not really fitting so well for an organic track, but that's just my style. So I wanted to keep it a little bit more, gritty for the bass line. Let's look at the synths themselves. So I'm using a serum patch that I made called Fat Prog Bass. And it's just a sine wave with a little bit of a kind of like break here. Sub is a triangle, and then the second oscillator is a sawtooth. This is down 2 octaves. This is down 3. Let's listen to the individual layers. There's the strong bass frequency. Then I have this other octave that's pretty low, very subby. And then the third octave is the color that comes with it. If you want to learn how to make a really nice, warm, organic bass, I have a video on that. I'll put a link up here in the corner and you can watch that after. The filter's cutting out a lot of that high end that I don't need for this bass. And remember, in the download, you'll get these presets as well, so don't worry about if you have to recreate them, you can get them in the product files. The other serum here actually has an LFO moving on it, which I think is really cool. It adds a bit of movement. So it's the same bass line. I've just swapped out this for a 4088, turned off the sub, and then the octaves of both of those up, and this is how it sounds. I've also put a compressor with like this OTT multiband. The LFO here is just on the frequency, pushing it up back and forth. It just gives it a bit of movement and variation. Even though it's very subtle, it just adds a bit of movement to the bass. Very simple to do. Just throw an LFO on one of these frequencies, push it up, and then you get a bit of movement with some filtering. And the last 2 layers, I have a Alex Orion bass from another video where I covered how to make music like Alex Orion. It's basically the exact same synth preset as this one. And then here we have this like wom sound. And it's the same Alex Orion bass, but I've increased the attack. I've increased the attack and the release and brought down the decay. So it goes up, then down, and then when it releases, it kind of fades out with the tail. So it's whoa. And I've also added a little bit more compression on there. I want to show you a cool trick that I did with the bass to make the track feel much more emotional and melodic. The key of the track is actually F minor, but I'm playing most of the time in C sharp minor on the bass. Usually the telltale sign of a track's key is the root note of the bass, but the whole time I'm playing C sharp minor up until this section right here where a piano comes in and some other melodic elements come in. And I felt like that was a perfect time to resolve the bass back to the F minor, because when those new melodic elements come in on the root note, it resolves the bass line and it feels really melodic. So I'll show you the difference between playing it back on the F minor the whole time versus the C sharp to the F minor and also the C sharp the whole time. This is what it sounds like if I'm playing the root note the whole time. This is if I'm playing C sharp the whole time. And this is what the actual track is when I go from here at the C sharp to the F minor when the other melodic elements come in, making it feel very emotional. That chord change in the bass line works very well with those melodic elements. And to do this, I went up from the F to the minor 6th, which is 8 semitones, which is given the track that emotional feeling. It doesn't have to be a minor 6th. It can be a couple different notes, but that's just the one that worked really well with the emotion that I was trying to go for here. And playing the track in that C sharp the whole time leading up to that really created a sense of tension that you didn't really know you even felt until it was resolved. Then at the end of the track, I swapped them. So when the drop comes in, you're expecting it to play on that F and it's playing the C sharp, and listen how that sounds. Again, using the melodic elements of the rest of the track to work against the bass. And then when it switches, the resolve happens. And then I forgot to mention, it also goes down to the D sharp at the end. So from the C sharp to the F and then back to the D sharp. And what's really important to note is when I switched these, originally I had these reversed and it just didn't hit the same. And so the takeaway is that the melodic elements that you have within the track really do matter for things that are surrounding it. So not just the bass line, but the pianos, the chords, the strings, the vocals, everything you put. So it's a good idea to try different notes playing off other notes. So I'm using my bass line, but you can do this with chords or strings or melodies. Just try changing around the notes and playing them at different times and see how they interact with each other, because everything else is the same here except the bass line, but by switching that bass line around, it gave me so much more emotion. Let's listen with it swapped, and then we'll go back one more time to the more emotional version. Original version. So in my opinion, it's way more melodic this way, and it's just the two notes that are changing. Everything else is the same. I really wanted to put a focus on this because this is the theme for the rest of the track. It's not just the bass line, it's the other elements that I'm going to be showing you. They are working with the other elements to create that broad spectrum of melody. So I'm going to go into the vocal section of the track, and there's a lot of vocal snippets, but something that people ask me all the time is, where do you get vocals? And I'm going to actually use today's sponsor to show you. Audemy is a AI vocal conversion tool. They claim that you can take any vocal off of like YouTube or anything and have an AI vocal singer do a cover of that, and then it's royalty free because it's no longer the original content but somebody else singing that. You can actually type in songs here and it will find the YouTube videos of these acapellas. So I know this is a pretty deep sounding song. I can change the pitch, put my conversion strength. I want to go 100%. I just want the vocal AI tool to do this, and then I can choose my vocalist. I chose my singer, Rebecca. Afrobeat makes sense for organic house. I've chosen my sample, and then the settings here, I can click convert, and then we can take a listen. So I have three different versions here.
Why you standing over there with your pose on? Never strips off for me, go.
I think I like this one the best, so I can download this, throw it in my DAW. Before I do that, I can actually go into this new tool which makes harmonies, which is really cool. Throw that into here and create different harmonies. So I go and choose my key and then add different harmonies, and you can choose vocalist, you can add fifths and stuff like that. It's super cool. And this is how it sounds to the harmonies.
You got me moaning now.
So let's add a third here and then a melody here, and let's just see how this sounds.
You got me moaning now.
Maybe it's too much. Let's take out the third and just add the melody.
You got me moaning now. I got a secret that I wanna show you. Oh.
So I've previewed it. I can hit convert, download it, and throw it in my project. I'm actually using Audemy for some of my new projects that I'm trying out. So if you're interested in checking out Audemy, I'll put a link in the description below as well. For organic house drums, usually you want a lot of nice shakers, organic sounds, rattles, and tambourines, and it's very, very vital to get this sound to use percussion that sounds very organic and realistic. Let's take a listen to the drums really quickly. The tambourine is pretty quiet in that drum mix. It just gives that nice little ear candy, that little tickle on the ears, and then it sounds really bright and really nice. I have a couple percussion here. They really benefit when they sound very organic. So I have the snare. It's almost like a tom sound. I've pitched it down 7 semitones and then added a delay to it to get that nice crispy, like big sound, a big hybrid reverb with 3.5 seconds of decay time. So it's like really tribal sounding. This percussion here, like a blip sound, I've pushed it up 17 semitones. So it's it's kind of like a bass sound, but I've pushed it up so much to get that blip. And then this is another percussion on its own, very organic sounding. The delay and the reverb really push it kind of back in the mix, but you don't want it too far back. You just want it to sound like it's, you know, played in like a live setting. It really helps. Then I have these shakers. So multiple shaker loops are really going to help create this very organic sound. It's vital to get some really good shaker loops. I use all the time these Basic Waves shaker loops. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. This gives you that nice movement, that velocity change, that realism. And then I combine it with another shaker. This is from the original. It's more like a hi-hat shaker. tambourine, and then the other shaker, and then all together they create just a huge soundscape of drums. This is the percussion from the original. I cut out the low end because it was a bit muddy. Some sidechain from the kick to give it that nice pumping. This is another, there's shakers in here, there's percussion in here, there's so many percussion in here, and this is how you get those really organic, full sounding drums. A nice loop like this can go a long way. Don't be afraid to use loops, but don't rely on them solely, right? Like I've added my own percussion, I've added my own layers. And then what's important is that your hi-hat still cuts through that mix. So then we'll turn on the hi-hats. And then lastly is the clap. And the clap usually is a bit softer. Again, realistic sounding. You can also use like wood sticks as your clap. Oh, not these. Like stuff like this. You can use those as your clap as well, and they work really well with this style. I love this clap. But I actually pushed it up a semitone, and I faded it out, and I faded it the beginning in a little bit. This is the original clap. Way too big, so I've faded it out. And then I've moved the transient beginning up so that it's way shorter of a clap, and it's just a bit softer. Overdrive to give it some crunch. And then some EQ to cut out some of that grit. I always recommend pitching your drums up 1 or 2 semitones or down 1 or 2 semitones and seeing how they feel in the mix. Also have the rides. This is just to add some spice to the track. I found that the last part of the track, the climax, I wanted it to be like progressive and just getting bigger and bigger. So I added these rides later on to give it a bit of energy. Just a simple ride with some sidechain compression. On the group itself, I have some glue compression and then some reverb and EQ. That's for just my breakdowns. Let's listen to the drums, kick and bass all together without the synths. For the hi-hats, you want to choose ones that are pretty mid-present but also sharp. So you don't want them super sharp because then they're going to be ear-piercing, but you want them mid-present and crispy so that they really cut through. Then these hats here are like accent hats just to give it a bit of movement as well. And having multiple layers like this with these different tails and these different movements and dynamics can really make these sound very professional. All right, so now we're going to jump into the synths, which is obviously an integral part of the track because there's going to be so many chords and strings and the vocal snippets that just really elevate the emotion behind this track. Also, it is super hot in my studio. It's finally hot in Berlin. I'm super stoked, but man, I am sweating over here. Like I said, there's a lot of remix stems, so a lot of this will already be audio, but I'll explain what I think that they did to make these sounds. This is marimba, and it's this nice melody. It's either a preset or it's an audio sample. I don't know if they recorded it themselves, but finding samples like this are so good for organic house. Listen to that. Right, and having that in the breakdown only just kind of elevated that breakdown a little bit, giving it its own unique flavor only in the break. It's pretty hard to hear, but I just felt like it added a little bit of ear candy and a little bit of, something special to the breakdown. But yeah, just an audio sample. You can find that in Splice or in sample packs. And I'll mention it again that using real samples and real instruments will definitely make it sound more organic and realistic. Let's take a look at the piano chords first, because I noticed that a lot of the people that I teach, they stick to only using minor chords or major chords, whatever scale they're in, which reminds me, I teach music production online. Click the link in the description below if you want to learn more. If you want to add some more emotion to your chords, switch between minor and major. It makes a huge difference when you're trying to write chord progressions. If we look here, we have 4 chords, but they're going from minor to major. So here I have the F minor chord, but it's inverted. So it's the F minor, we have the F, the C, and then the G sharp here. But if I bring this G sharp down, then now it becomes the regular F minor triad. And then another octave of the F. I bring that back up to make it an inversion, and it spans more notes, and it can sound a bit more expressive and beautiful. Then we have the C sharp major chord. And then again with that inversion, D sharp major, inversion, And lastly, A sharp minor. With the inversion, all 4 notes together. And in the track, once you have these, it's very easy to put more notes on top to be even more expressive. Just try to stay within the scale. Here are the pads from the original track. Which are very lush and really help to fill up the track and have a lot of movement in the background. And to make these, I'm pretty sure what they did is just added a lot of reverb onto the piano. So I'm gonna pump up that reverb to 100%, a lot of decay, and then I'm gonna put an LFO on the auto filter so it opens and closes with the LFO. Let's take a listen. Pretty close for making that in 5 seconds. And what you can do with this like really lush sound is you have it in the background, especially if it's not exactly on the grid, it adds a ton of movement and it can make it sound very professional. I have another octave of that pad, just a lower octave. And what the really nice part of this track was the guitar. So this is, again, a real instrument. Here's the original guitar sample. I lowered the octave of that guitar because I felt like it fit the track better. And when it drops in with that bass changing, it just sounds so beautiful. So it's a good idea when you're using these different samples and real instruments and stuff to try lowering or bringing up the pitch to see if it works better in your track. That's what I did here. It sounds great. There's only a couple more things I want to show you. One of them that's really important is this percussion. I took a percussion from the original. It's really bright. It's a lot of movement. And I decided to change the pitch to create a chord structure out of this, or like a melody out of this. So the first notes are here. The second notes go up. Like cut out the high end with the EQ and then I kind of faded it up. And this just like percussive sound just ringing in the background. It has movement. Again, it's elevating the track because it has that percussion sound. So it sounds organic, but it also has the melodic side of things. And when I change the notes, it adds more melody to the track. When I listen here and then change the note, it adds more value to the melody. So I'm using all these different layers. I'm going to show you some more that I'm using, but I'm using these different layers and changing the notes of more than just lead sounds and pads. I'm using the piano, I'm using percussive sounds, I'm using vocals, which I'll talk about next. And all of these together, playing within these scales, creating these big structures of sounds, of melodies and chords within multiple instruments is how I got this really, in my opinion, really beautiful professional sounding track. This vocal here, combining it with this, and then go into the next one. Now these two work off of each other, and it's that balance of working off of the changing notes and chords and root notes that gives the complexity to the melody. I know I'm talking about this a lot, but it's just something that I really want to drive home because I think it's very important to understand, and it's kind of hard to explain. More of like a feeling you get when you listen to it, so it's kind of arbitrary. I used a lot of vocal snippets because the original had a lot of vocal snippets, and I think they elevate the track really nicely, so let's take a listen to some of those vocals. I think my favorite one is actually this yoo-hoo that plays throughout the whole second half of the track. And what's cool about this is it actually adds a bit of rhythm because it's like on beat. So it's do, do. And actually some of the other ones do it as well, like this one. I used a delay here to actually create a rhythm from it. So it just stops. I use the delay to play over and over on the beat. So it's important to actually choose the placement of the vocal snippet so that they're rhythmic with the track. Okay, I also do that for this yoo-hoo. Added another one. I also lowered the pitch of that vocal. I find that like the lower pitch can sound more emotional, giving that like kind of old school deep house vibe. And then one more vocal here. And then this one here is a little bit more melodic. And these And these vocal snippets just give more of a human feel to the track, like literally like a human feel because it's singing. All right, if you're still with me, I know there's lots of layers, but this is a really complex style of music and it has a lot of layers. So this is why I'm just driving in so many of these points home. I have more atmospheres here. These atmospheres are reverse guitar sounds, which sound really nice. And the movement on them is so important. So notice how they're not really lined up to any grid. They're just kind of duplicated over and over, which makes it a little bit different for every section of the track. And this makes it so that it's a little bit more unpredictable and it works differently across all the different elements of the track every time that it's going through that audio. We can take a listen to this. It's very lush sounding. So much movement. It's so lush, and just having that in the background just really helps the ear candy of the track and doesn't feel so rigid. You can get these in sample packs. You can make them yourself by the technique that I showed you before with the piano reverb. And they're just so good for adding to tracks like this, just giving a huge soundscape, and it just really tickles your ears. I'll put a link to this one as well. It's another Basic Waves pack. There's an ambience down here. It's just another one of those sounds that I just showed you. Very quietly in the background. Another one here, this reverse guitar. So it's the guitar samples just reversed and a lot of delay on them. Create that really nice soundscape. And what I did is I added in my own synths here, these synthetic strings. It's an Ableton preset, and this is to give it a bit more emotion. And if we listen to this here, it's just like almost like a trancey feel, but I just really wanted to keep progressing the track and making it more and more intense as it builds up in the climax. And just listen to how this is adding value along with the rides to give it a bit more excitement. What's that super saw sound? I'll turn it back down. And what I did after that was add another octave on top of that. So my point here is that you can just add in more layers, more complexity, more melodies. Obviously, it can get crowded and you can overdo it very easily. There is a lot going on in this track. There's a lot of layers of vocals, a lot of complexities. It was quite difficult to do, but I think it really paid off. And just by adding in an extra synth like this was so easy, just a couple different notes, but I just jammed along to it. I just went with my emotion and I just added that extra little bit on top to make that final drop a little bit more intense. If you want to watch another organic house tutorial, click this video right here. Or if you want to see something that YouTube thinks that you'll like, then click this video right here.